I know it's been a minute since my last video, there just hasn't been much I've been excited about lately. But in the last couple of weeks, I've been watching a lot of new TV shows that I've been dying to talk about. The first show I'm going to be talking about today is the fourth season of a little indie project you might have heard of called Stranger Things. After Stranger Things Season 3, I was kind of tired of the whole series, and it seemed like they were just dragging it out because it was the only thing making Netflix any money. I still enjoyed the first 3 seasons a lot, but I was very hesitant about what a 4th season would bring. I was fully expecting Season 4 to be an unrelenting beating of a dead horse, so you can imagine how surprised I was to find that this new season was easily the best one since the first, and one of the best things Netflix has put out in a while. Before I get into this review, remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video and want to see more like it. Alright, now let's get into it. So like I said before, I was highly skeptical going into this season, and I was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. Even though I liked Season 3, it left me with the expectation of Season 4 feeling very drawn out. It seemed like even during Season 3, they were having to stretch the story out to find new ways to keep it going. But somehow, Season 4 managed to completely reinvigorate the Stranger Things world and even retroactively improve the story of the previous seasons. The story of Season 1 felt like a lightning in a bottle with something so unique and refreshing, but it slowly started to fall off as the show progressed. But apparently the Duffer Brothers had the entire story for all 5 seasons of the show planned out, which I never would have believed until now. Introducing a new villain that adds a completely new perspective to what we've seen before made everything a lot more exciting. Not only does Vecna having a personal connection to Eleven change the stakes significantly, but it also recontextualizes the entire story, even what we saw in the very beginning in Season 1. Overall, I'm very impressed with the writing this season. It's not perfect, but there was more that I liked than that I didn't. Now I want to break down the plot a little more. Season 4 introduces a new villain called Vecna, who is crumbling up random teenagers into little balls. Obviously, people aren't too happy about this, especially once Max becomes the next target, and the gang are doing everything they can to protect her and find a way to stop Vecna. Meanwhile, there are 3 other plotlines going on. One where Eleven is getting bullied by the meanest teenagers that ever existed, and then gets arrested for busting that girl's head open. Oh, and Will, Mike, and Jonathan are there too, I guess. Then you have Joyce and Murray going to Russia to rescue Hopper, who is trying to break out of prison. Then lastly, there's this high school basketball team led by this dweeb Jason, who are running around telling the whole town that the gang is a cult responsible for the murders of these kids. The first episode felt very bloated to me because we already have so many characters from the previous season, plus a bunch of new ones right out of the gate. It started off feeling a lot like Avengers Infinity War, where we are switching between all these different groups of people, some of which there's like 20 minutes in between seeing them. Once the groups start to form a little more, the plot gets more structured, and from there on out, it's off to the races. I love the murder mystery in the first couple episodes, and the amped-up horror this season was a much-needed addition. It made Vecna feel like a more credible threat because even though the Demogorgons are scary-ass monsters, Vecna was going around into these kids' minds and turning them into origami. Episode 4 might be the best episode of the show yet. Max's near-death was such a powerful moment and an important turning point for the season. Sadie Sink in general was on a whole other level than most of her co-stars and was probably the most improved character of the season. Probably the biggest problem with this season for me was that the separate subplots were very different in terms of level of interest and enjoyment. The storyline with Steve, Dustin, Robin, Nancy, Eddie, Max, and Lucas was easily the most interesting, so when some of the other ones were happening, I found myself just wanting them to end so that I could get back to the best one. The Russian subplots are fairly interesting, but they have some slow points and are nowhere near as exciting as the other stuff until it gets to the later episodes. And don't even get me started on the whole California subplot. There is a reason that they didn't even give a second of screen time in episode 7, and that reason is because it's boring as shit. I guess now I want to talk about each of the characters, and the easiest way I can think to explain it is like this. So here is the impromptu Stranger Things tier list, with each tier ranked on how strange the things are. So this is where I'd say the characters were at for me at the end of Season 3. There aren't any that I really disliked, but the ones at the top are the best. So in season 4, we get some new characters, but most of them weren't around for very long, so they are just gonna go down here for obvious reasons. The only one I even care enough to talk about is Eddie, so let's just get this out of the way. Eddie is one of the best characters this season. He brought a fun new dynamic and personality to the group that I really loved. I'm kind of annoyed that they killed him off, just like they always do with the new characters, because I think he would have been great to keep around. Don't get me wrong, it was an impactful death scene, but it would have been nice to kill someone else off and keep some new blood on the scene for season 5. Either way, Eddie was an amazing character, and the Master of Puppets scene was probably my favorite in the whole season. Robin, Steve, and Dustin were my favorites of season 3, and they are even better in this one, especially Steve, who keeps surprising me every season. I love the re-emergence of his relationship with Nancy, who I also liked a lot more this season. It's so funny that she's always the one who's strapped to the teeth, and it's nice that they actually gave her something to do, instead of her just being there like in the previous seasons. Speaking of just being there, Jonathan, Will, and Mike do absolutely nothing this entire season and are definitely in the bottom tier. Jonathan is just stoned and completely clueless the entire time. Will is just along for the ride and doesn't really do anything the whole time. Once it gets to the final 2 episodes and Will starts pouring his entire heart out to Mike and bonding with Jonathan, that brought him up a little bit. But they are probably going to save most of his development for the next season, so there wasn't enough here. Now we need to talk about Mike. He is the worst character of the entire show, and it pissed me off every time he was on screen. I don't want to call out Finn Wolfhard or anything, because it was probably just a lack of good writing for his character, but his acting felt super bland to me. It also didn't help that he was completely oblivious to every single thing Will said to him, and he was also just rude to everyone else that talked to him. So basically, Mike sucks, and this video is now going to be entirely dedicated to why Mike Wheeler is the worst character and why I hate him. Nah, I'm just kidding. But I am going to throw Mike in the dead tier because he is completely dead to me now. I'm also going to throw Argyle somewhere in the middle here because even though he's just there for comic relief, he was the only part of that subplot I even enjoyed. Like I already said, Max is probably the most improved this season with so much development and a commanding presence whenever she was on the screen, so she's joining the GOATs in the top tier. Then there's Lucas, who had one of the best arcs this season. Having him try to become popular after the group separated and started high school is a natural progression for him. He went from very unlikable at the start to very sympathetic by the end. Lucas could have been one of my favorite characters if it weren't for one important moment that was missing. As much as I loved seeing Lucas beat the pulp out of that dumb jock, there was such an obvious missed opportunity for him and Max. Max is getting attacked by Vecna for the second time, and Jason has Lucas at gunpoint. Jason steps on her tape deck and completely destroy it, which makes Lucas angry because it's the only way to save her. Jason and Lucas are fighting while she's getting lifted up into the air. Okay, so this is where I want to give you 2 options to pick from. So let me throw out this hypothetical question. Which ending to this scene makes more sense? First, there's the one we got, where Eleven and Vecna throw each other back and forth, and then Max is killed or put into a coma or something. Or what about this? Everything happens the exact same way, except Eleven is getting her ass handed to her by Vecna, and then he's about to kill Max. But then Lucas knocks out Jason, and since the tape deck with Kate Bush on it is destroyed, there's only one way for Lucas to save her. He has to sing the damn song to her. Like, come on, it seems like that is exactly where they were going with that scene, but then they just completely wasted it. What is even the point of having the tape being destroyed to just not have it pay off at all? Not only would it have been a much more impactful scene to have someone else save the day other than Eleven, it would have been a perfect ending to Lucas's character arc. He would have fully transitioned to trying to be a tough jock like Jason to being emotionally vulnerable when it matters most. As much as I commend a lot of the writing this season, there are some missed opportunities like this that brought the whole season down for me. Anyway, to move on to some of the other characters, next I want to talk about Joyce and Hopper. I didn't like them quite as much this season just because their plot lines weren't as interesting as the others, but I did love their reunion at the end between the two of them and with the kids. Then you've got Murray, who was just as great this season as he was in the last, so he's going to stay at the top, especially now that we got to see some of his kick-ass karate moves. Then, last but not least, we have Eleven. Obviously, she is the main character of the whole show, so she tends to get more attention than anyone else, but I think it was just too much this season. The stuff at the beginning where she was getting bullied was just so overblown, and I didn't think the acting was all that impressive either, just like with Mike. Once we start to learn more about Eleven's backstory and her relationship with Brenner and One, it was a lot more interesting. Some of these parts are still very slow and not as fun to watch as the other plot lines, but it did add a lot of depth to the story. Seeing how Eleven basically created Vecna as she struggles to regain her powers was great, especially in episode 7. These parts of the story did take up a considerable amount of time, and I don't think all of it was completely necessary. These episodes are already so long, so I don't think it would have hurt to cut out some of this. The last episode specifically is way longer than it needs to be. Like I said before, I don't like the fact that they keep using Eleven to solve every problem in the show. They had it set up nicely for all the other characters to take down Vecna without Eleven's help, and I wish they would have went through with it. Eleven's whole storyline was about how she wasn't ready to take on these threats by herself and that she needed more training before she could leave. Instead of Eleven and Vecna going back and forth, pinning each other against the wall for no reason, why not let Eleven actually struggle to do it on her own and have her friends help her get through it? If she's trying to overcome what Brenner told her, then it would be much more valuable for her to learn that as long as she has help from her friends, she can get through anything. Even though they didn't end up beating him in the end, it seems like they stopped him long enough to regroup and go after him again. So long story short, I wasn't totally on board with Eleven this season, and I'm going to have to move her down a little bit. Alright, so I think that's all the characters I wanted to talk about, so now I'm just going to get into some more miscellaneous critique. The music choices were fantastic in this season. Connecting music to personal memories is a great way to add layers to a personality, and I think that's exactly what happened with Max. Running Up That Hill was such an inspired choice, and of course Metallica was too, like I mentioned before. I also really love that Separate Ways remix at the end of episode 8, it just totally geared me up for the finale. One thing I found absolutely hilarious was the closed captions. If you didn't watch Stranger Things with the captions on, then you aren't getting the complete experience. I'd recommend giving it a rewatch with them on so you don't miss out on gems such as tentacles squelching wetly and Demogorgon feeding wetly. There's a lot of wetness going on for some reason, but it definitely sets the mood. Also, I kind of mentioned this before, but these episodes were way too long. I don't think it was a big deal for most of them, but that last episode was just ridiculous. The whole point of a TV show is that you can tell a longer story broken up into smaller pieces to build suspense and keep intrigue high. When the finale is longer than the majority of full-length movies, it's hard to keep things moving for that long. I'm glad they at least split up the season into 2 parts, but I feel like weekly episodes are a must at this point. It sounds like they're going to be switching to weekly for season 5, which is great news, so hopefully it means Netflix is learning from their mistakes. The Duffer Brothers have really brought me around on this show again, and some of the writing they've done for this season was just phenomenal. I didn't love all of it, and there are some glaring missteps that did hinder my enjoyment, but it was still a great season of television nonetheless. I'm going to give Season 4 of Stranger Things a solid 8 out of 10. But I'm going to give Mike Wheeler a negative 8 out of 10. Let me know what you thought of the show in the comments, and I'd love to hear from some of my fellow Mike haters out there. What was your least favorite Mike moment of the season? Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and check out my channel for other videos like this one. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.